There's a warning older than the stars, one whispered across generations by those who dared and lost. Don't challenge a Scorpio. Not because they'll yell, not because they'll fight you in broad daylight, but because they will outlast you, outthink you, and if necessary, outsilence you. When you step into the shadows with a Scorpio, you're not facing a mere person. You're entering a spiritual labyrinth, one where your own lies echo back louder than your truth. They won't break you in one strike. They'll let you watch yourself unravel. Now, let me be clear, not every Scorpio is out to get you. They are the most loyal protectors, the deepest lovers, the most unshakable allies, until you make the fatal mistake of turning their intensity into a battlefield. You see, Scorpio is not a sign you defeat. It's a force you survive, if you're lucky. Let me tell you a story. A man once thought he could manipulate a Scorpio woman, emotionally intelligent, wildly intuitive, quiet, but watching. He played games, lied, ghosted. She said nothing, not one text, not one fight, just silence. And then came her transformation. 1 year later, the man watched her rise. New city, new life. She had become everything he once feared. Untouchable, unbothered, unforgettable. That's what happens when you challenge a Scorpio. You think it's a battle. They make it a burial. Why? Because Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, planet of death, transformation, and rebirth. This is not an ordinary sign. This is a sign of initiation. When you dare to provoke them, you awaken not just their anger, but their ancestral shadow. And when that shadow rises, it doesn't just confront you, it confronts the illusion in you, your lies, your fears, your intentions. It becomes a spiritual mirror so honest it burns. And that, dear listener, is the real danger. You don't regret challenging Scorpio because they hurt you. You regret it because they reveal who you really are, and you were never ready for that. So before we begin with the 12 brutal, soul-igniting reasons you should never challenge a Scorpio, I ask you to breathe in deeply. Let go of what you think you know about this sign. Because what we're about to uncover isn't just astrology, it's psychological warfare, it's karmic law, it's spiritual truth, and it begins now. Reason 1, they remember what you forgot. You may have already moved on. You may have already forgotten what you said that night, the tone you used, how your eyes flickered when you lied. But Scorpio hasn't. They don't keep score like others. They don't replay things because they're bitter. They remember because they feel on a soul level, not just the words, but the energy behind them. To challenge a Scorpio is to enter into an energetic contract you didn't even realize you signed. Every word you say, every micro expression, every silence between sentences, they store it, not out of revenge, out of pattern recognition, because here's what most people don't realize. Scorpios are natural forensic empaths. They don't just remember what happened, they remember what it meant. You could apologize 1,000 times, say you didn't mean it, say it was just a bad day. But Scorpio already noticed how often your bad days came when someone else was watching. They remember how quickly your tone changed when you were in public versus private. They saw the crack in your smile, the flicker of contempt. You didn't say it, but your soul did. They heard that. Let me share a real story. There was a Scorpio man in his early 30s, quiet, successful, a creative force in the corporate design world. He was part of a friend group who always joked, sometimes harshly. One day, in the middle of a gathering, one of the friends said in front of everyone, "You're so intense, man. Sometimes I think you enjoy making people feel inferior." Everyone laughed. It felt like just another joke. The Scorpio smiled, but didn't forget. Months later, when the same friend needed a critical referral to land a high-level job, guess who wasn't mentioned? Guess who quietly pulled their energy back from the friendship? Guess who no longer returned calls? The same Scorpio they thought would laugh it off. You see, when a Scorpio is challenged, even subtly, it leaves an imprint. You may not even know you crossed a line, but they did. This is the mistake people make. They think only the loud betrayals count: cheating, ghosting, lying. But for Scorpio, micro-betrayals matter just as much. You rolled your eyes during their vulnerability. You changed the subject when they shared something deep. You used their truth as gossip at brunch. They saw it, they absorbed it, and now they remember, not with bitterness, but with sacred clarity. Scorpios have a kind of spiritual memory that doesn't fade. It's not about vengeance, it's about spiritual accounting. They keep track of how safe your soul feels, and when that safety is broken, they recalibrate accordingly. Sometimes that means forgiveness. Other times it means permanent distance. So here's the truth. You don't get to decide what was small. Scorpio does, because they live in the world of emotional truth, and that world has no statute of limitations. Life lesson: Scorpios are not sentimental, they're sacred. If you dare to challenge them, remember, you're not just fighting a person, you're confronting a soul who sees you beyond the surface. Never underestimate what they remember, because sometimes what they remember is exactly what destroys your illusion. Reason 2, they master the art of emotional distance. You thought you still had them because they smiled, because they listened, because they said, "I'm fine." But what you didn't notice was the slow withdrawal of their spirit, the way their gaze became less open, the way their responses turned into short, quiet echoes of who they once were with you. Scorpios don't scream when they're hurt. They vanish, spiritually first, physically later. This is what makes challenging a Scorpio so disorienting. You don't realize the war has already begun because they're not throwing punches. They're retreating, calculating, elevating. Scorpios have mastered the art of emotional distance, not as a game, not as a manipulation, but as a sacred survival mechanism. They feel everything so deeply that to survive in this world, they had to learn when to disconnect from people who play with emotion as if it were cheap currency. It starts slowly. They stop telling you about their day. They don't share their dreams anymore. They no longer react when you try to provoke them. At first, you think it's maturity, then you think it's coldness. But by the time you realize what's truly happened, it's already too late. They're gone, not blocked, not ghosted, just gone from the level that matters. Let me tell you a story. A Scorpio woman, early 40s, successful and private. She was in a long-term relationship with a man who constantly dismissed her intuition. He'd say, "You're overthinking. You're too sensitive. That's not a big deal." Years went by. She stopped arguing. She smiled more, laughed less. Then, one day, she booked a silent retreat in Sedona. 2 weeks alone with her thoughts, she never returned to the relationship. She came back home, packed her things, and left with a single sentence: "I emotionally left you years ago. Today, I'm just catching my body up to the truth." That's Scorpio. When they emotionally detach, there's no grand performance, there's no screaming match, there's just a soul that has realigned with truth and no longer includes you. And make no mistake, they are not numb, they still feel, but now they feel for themselves. That's the secret power of the Scorpio's emotional distance. It's not cold, it's sacred self-rescue. It's the act of returning energy to the self after it's been misused, ignored, or disrespected. And you won't see it coming. Because Scorpios are excellent at masking withdrawal as peace. They don't beg, they don't chase, they simply observe. And if the soul connection is broken, they retreat behind walls even love cannot pass through. And from that distance, they transform. They become stronger, sharper, wiser, and far more selective with who gets access to their emotional world next. Life lesson: emotional distance is not punishment, it's protection. Scorpios aren't cold, they're conscious. They don't disconnect to hurt you, they disconnect to heal themselves. So if you ever feel a Scorpio slowly fading from you, don't wait for a final warning. Because with Scorpio, silence is the final warning. Reason 3, they don't retaliate, they transform. When someone challenges most people, they react. They fight back, scream, slam doors, throw insults like daggers, then regret it in the morning. But Scorpio, they don't react. They transform. This is where people misunderstand them the most. You assume that if they didn't explode, you got away with it. You think that if they stayed quiet, you dodged the consequence. But with Scorpio, the silence is never the end of the story. It's the incubation period, the cocoon, the death before rebirth moment you weren't wise enough to recognize. You challenged them? Then watch closely, because something within them just shifted and you'll never meet the same version of them again. Let me tell you a real story. There was a Scorpio man in his mid-20s. He had been in a toxic relationship with someone who constantly tried to diminish his light, criticizing his ambitions, belittling his intuition, and mocking his spiritual interests. He didn't argue, he didn't fight. He just grew quiet, withdrew, and when he finally left, he didn't send a breakup message. He sent a poetry book he wrote during the relationship. It was filled with lines like, "You tried to kill the fire in me, but I became the sun instead." That's what Scorpio does. They take the ashes of your betrayal and alchemize them into gold. They don't seek revenge through drama. They let their evolution be the revenge, because here's the truth. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth. They are the alchemists of the Zodiac, and that means even your betrayal becomes their metamorphosis. While you think they're wounded and sulking, they're deep in transformation, shedding their old self, becoming sharper, more soulful, more sovereign. You see, Scorpio doesn't need to destroy you, they just outgrow you. And that, ironically to Glee, hurts more, because now you have to watch them rise, thrive, shine, love again, this time deeper and better. And you're no longer invited into that version of their life. This is why challenging a Scorpio is never just a fight. It's a cosmic opportunity for them to spiritually level up, and for you to watch from a distance as you realize, I wasn't part of their destruction, I was part of their transformation, and now they've left me behind. This transformation power is what terrifies people the most about Scorpio. You can't predict it, you can't manipulate it, and once it begins, there's no going back. They won't tell you they're changing, they just do it. They emerge with new boundaries, new energy, new clarity, and they don't ask for permission. They become the most dangerous kind of force, someone who was once deeply attached to you and now no longer needs you to breathe. Life lesson: don't mistake Scorpio's silence for surrender. They're not plotting revenge, they're resurrecting themselves. You may think you won the argument, but Scorpio doesn't win by hurting you back. They win by becoming someone you'll never have access to again. And that, my friend, is the kind of power you never want to provoke. Reason 4, they know your soul before you do. You think you're mysterious. You think you've hidden your wounds well. You think your smile is convincing. But when a Scorpio locks eyes with you, they're not reading your face. They're reading your soul, and not the version you show the world, the version you haven't even met yet. This is the part that makes challenging a Scorpio so dangerous, because they're not reacting to who you pretend to be. They're reacting to who you actually are underneath the performance. They can see your truth, the beautiful parts, the broken parts, and the buried parts, before you found the courage to face it yourself. That's why people often feel exposed around Scorpio. Not because they're aggressive, but because their energy is like a mirror that reflects back everything unspoken. You might be charismatic, smooth-talking, socially skilled, but if you're fake, Scorpio knows. If you're hiding pain, Scorpio feels it. If you're lying to yourself, Scorpio won't even need you to say it. They'll just look at you, and you'll flinch. Let me tell you a story. A Scorpio woman, late 30s, worked as a therapist in New York. She had a patient who seemed perfect on paper, confident, driven, emotionally intelligent, but she could sense something off, a deep sadness hidden behind the man's endless humor. One day she said, "You always joke about being alone. Do you really think no one ever wanted to stay? Or did you decide you weren't worth staying for?" The room fell silent. He broke. He cried for the first time in 10 years. He later admitted that no one had ever seen through him like that. He had built a fortress, and in a single sentence, she walked right in. That's Scorpio. They don't need years. They need a moment, a sentence, a glance. They don't confront your ego, they reach through it. And what they pull out is something you've spent your whole life avoiding. But here's the thing, this power is a gift when used with love. It's terrifying when you've challenged them. Because once a Scorpio sees your soul, they know how to honor it or how to pierce it. And they always choose based on truth, not emotion, not vengeance, truth. So if you've lied, manipulated, or tried to fool them, you may not even realize what you've triggered. They won't scream, they won't call you out, but they'll quietly seal the energetic door between you and them, and you'll feel it, like a sudden drop in temperature, like oxygen leaving the room. Why? Because they no longer see your potential, they see your pattern. And once that happens, Scorpio doesn't stay. They protect their sacred space, because to a Scorpio, soul energy is currency, and they do not invest in dishonesty. Life lesson: you can fool the world, but not a Scorpio. They don't connect to your mask, they connect to your essence. And if your essence is rooted in confusion, manipulation, or avoidance, they will love you enough to walk away. To challenge a Scorpio is to forget that someone out there knows your soul better than you do, and that someone isn't trying to hurt you. They're just done letting you lie to yourself in their presence. Reason 5. They make pain their power. Most people run from pain. They deny it, numb it, distract themselves from it. But Scorpio, they walk into the fire and become it. You challenge a Scorpio, thinking you've hurt them. You think the betrayal, the loss, the humiliation will break them. But here's the truth. Scorpio doesn't just survive pain. They become more powerful because of it. This is not poetic metaphor. It is the literal emotional alchemy that Scorpios perform. Ruled by Pluto, the planet of death and resurrection, Scorpios were born to rise from ashes that would bury anyone else. Their pain isn't something they hide in the dark. It's what fuels their transformation, their ambition, their evolution. Let me give you a real example. A Scorpio woman in her 20s was abandoned by her closest friends after a scandal. She had been falsely accused of something she didn't do. No one asked for her side. They just disappeared. Left her name, her dignity, and her heart in ruins. For months, she was silent. Not a single post on social media, no long explanations, no attempts to win people back. Instead, she built. She started her own online design business. She studied human psychology. She learned marketing, shadow work, and energy healing. 3 years later, she was making 6 figures from her bedroom, speaking at conferences, and had become a spiritual mentor to women who had faced public humiliation. And those old friends? They watched in stunned silence as she rose, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with power that was forged from the very pain they gave her. That's Scorpio. You give them fire and they build a kingdom from the smoke. They make heartbreak a lesson. They make rejection a redirection. They make loneliness a sanctuary. And by the time they've completed the transformation, they don't want revenge anymore because they've already won just by becoming who they were always meant to be. You see, Scorpios don't avoid the underworld. They are the underworld. They go into the places others are too afraid to enter, the heartbreak, the abandonment, the shadow self, and they mine those places for truth, power, clarity. That's why, when you challenge them, you never actually defeat them. You simply become a chapter in the book of their rebirth. And trust me, no one forgets the chapter where the phoenix caught fire. Life lesson: Scorpio's pain is not a weakness. It's a weapon, but not the kind that wounds, the kind that builds thrones. Because every heartbreak, every betrayal, every spiritual death they endure, they turn it into wisdom, into clarity, into power. So if you think hurting a Scorpio will destroy them, you're not ending their story. You're fueling their next evolution. Reason 6. Their silence speaks louder than your rage. You raised your voice. You slammed the door. You cursed, texted, deleted, then retyped. You raged, demanded, cried. And the Scorpio? They said nothing. Not a word, not a text, not a reaction. That's the moment people panic. Because they expect a Scorpio to fight, to lash out, to match their intensity. But instead, Scorpio does something far more chilling. They go silent. And that silence? It's not indifference, it's surgical detachment. It's what happens when a soul realizes it no longer needs to waste energy where the truth is being denied. You see, Scorpio is a water sign. But unlike the flowing rivers of Cancer or the crashing waves of Pisces, Scorpio is still water, deep, dark, undisturbed, until you drown. Their silence isn't empty, it's loaded with observation, with analysis, with spiritual processing, because while you're yelling to be right, Scorpio is listening for what you're not saying. They're watching the way your voice trembles. They're calculating the energy behind your words, and they're deciding not whether to fight back, but whether you're even worth the emotional expense anymore. Let me share a real-life story. A Scorpio man in his late 30s was in a relationship with someone who constantly threatened to leave during arguments. Every time she didn't get her way, she'd shout, "Maybe we should just break up." She never meant it until the day she said it again, and he responded with nothing but silence. He didn't fight, he didn't beg. He just looked at her and walked out. He never returned. Years later, she confessed to a friend, "His silence broke me more than any screaming ever could." That's Scorpio. They don't need to slam doors, they are the door. And when it closes, it doesn't creak. It seals permanently. This is what people misunderstand. They think Scorpio's silence is passive-aggressive. It's not. It's sacred boundary enforcement. Because to a Scorpio, words are sacred. And if they no longer speak to you, it's because your energy has already said enough. Their silence is a verdict, a mirror, a space in which you hear your own chaos echoing back at you. And here's the most haunting part. When a Scorpio goes silent, they're not just done with the conversation, they might be done with the connection. This is why challenging a Scorpio is so emotionally dangerous. You might think silence means you still have time, but often the Scorpio has already let go. Spiritually, emotionally, energetically. Their body is just the last part to catch up. Life lesson. Never underestimate the weight of Scorpio's silence. They don't use it to manipulate, they use it to protect. When a Scorpio stops talking, they're not trying to win. They've already decided what's no longer worth losing themselves over. And the scariest part? They never raise their voice. They just remove their energy. And once they've done that, you'll feel the absence louder than the loudest scream. Reason 7. They turn betrayal into strategy. Most people experience betrayal and fall apart. They break down, spiral, lose direction. But a Scorpio? They do something far more terrifying. They turn betrayal into data, and they turn that data into strategy. You thought you outsmarted them. You thought your lie slipped past them. You thought the mask you wore was convincing. But Scorpio was never reacting. They were recording every contradiction, every strange tone, every time your words said one thing but your energy said another. And the moment you betrayed them, whether through dishonesty, manipulation, or emotional neglect, they didn't crumble, they activated. You see, Scorpio is a fixed water sign, deeply intuitive but also intensely strategic. They don't just feel betrayal, they study it, they sit with it, they extract the spiritual and psychological truth behind it. And then, they adjust everything. Their energy, their behavior, their next move, and especially their access to you. Let me tell you a story. A Scorpio woman in her early 30s worked at a startup with a close colleague she considered a friend. They shared everything, projects, ambitions, even personal dreams. Until the day came when her colleague stole one of her ideas and pitched it to the CEO as her own. The Scorpio said nothing, no confrontation, no office drama. Instead, she watched, she listened, she re-strategized, she quietly began building her own pitch deck. She built alliances behind the scenes. She waited for her moment. And when it came, during a board presentation 2 months later, she introduced a concept so powerful and so precise that the company offered her the directorial role and asked her colleague to report to her. That's Scorpio. They don't retaliate with fire, they counter with precision. And here's the dangerous beauty of it. When you betray a Scorpio, you may think you've fooled them, but really you've just revealed your pattern. And they will now move in silence with a long-term strategy built not on revenge, but on clarity. Because Scorpio doesn't want to beat you, they want to win on a soul level. And that means not only evolving past the pain, but turning the pain into purpose, into planning, into progress. That's the difference. Others react from ego. Scorpio responds from inner intelligence. They won't show you what they're planning. They won't warn you what's coming. But trust this, by the time the consequences land, you'll realize they were never hurt and emotional. They were 10 steps ahead the whole time, and you walked straight into your own karma, which they no longer need to deliver. They let the universe handle that part. Life lesson. Scorpios don't seek chaos, they study it. And if you betray them, they won't break down. They'll rise up, smarter, calmer, and more focused than ever. Because to a Scorpio, betrayal isn't just pain, it's a map. And with it, they'll find a path you'll never be allowed to walk with them again. Reason 8. They burn bridges you thought were fireproof. You thought you had time. You thought the bond was unbreakable. You thought they'd always be there, waiting, forgiving, understanding. But one day, you turned around and the bridge between you and the Scorpio was gone, not broken, not damaged, burned. And it wasn't impulsive, it wasn't emotional, it was sacred, intentional, final. Because when a Scorpio decides that a connection no longer honors their soul, they don't pause, they don't negotiate, they cut ties in fire. This is what most people can't grasp. They think if they apologize long enough, wait long enough, give Scorpio space, things will return to normal. But Scorpio doesn't believe in going back. Once they've seen your shadow and realized it is not evolving, they don't look twice. You see, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, the god of the underworld, the ruler of death and transformation. When they walk away, it's not a door closing, it's a death. And in their spiritual code, what is dead must stay dead. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio man in his late 20s. He had a best friend since childhood. They shared secrets, heartbreaks, laughter, loyalty, until one day, the friend made a cruel joke about the Scorpio's private trauma at a party. Everyone laughed, except him. He said nothing that night, not a single word. But the next day, he packed every memory, every gift, every photo, and left it at the friend's door with a note. Some bridges don't deserve repair. This is one of them. They never spoke again. No rage, no closure, just ashes. Because Scorpio's forgiveness is not cheap. Their loyalty is sacred. And when that loyalty is violated, they don't just distance themselves, they erase the route back. And here's the part that shakes people the most. Scorpios grieve silently. They will cry, they will ache, but they will never reopen that door because they've already buried what you're still trying to revive. You'll feel it in the way they no longer respond, in the way they walk past your name without blinkings, in the way your presence becomes invisible to them as if it never mattered. Because in their world, what no longer respects their depth does not deserve their presence. Life lesson. Scorpios don't leave like others, they end things on a soul level. And when they burn a bridge, it's not because they're angry, it's because they've outgrown the version of themselves that needed to cross it. So never assume a Scorpio will wait forever. Their silence is not indecision, it's often the first spark before the fire that ends everything. Reason 9, they love like it's eternal until it's over. When a Scorpio loves you, it doesn't feel casual, it doesn't feel light, it feels like gravity, like something ancient chose you, like their soul remembers yours from somewhere beyond this life. Scorpio doesn't date, they merge, they bind. They love like it's eternal, like your heartbeat has become part of theirs. They're the kind of lover who memorizes your voice in silence, who sees the details you don't even see in yourself. They'll protect you before you know you're in danger, believe in your dream more than you do, and carry your wounds like sacred ink across their heart. But if you betray them, if you lie, if you take their love for granted, if you treat their loyalty as disposable, you won't just lose a relationship, you'll lose an entire world. Because Scorpio doesn't fall in love halfway, and they don't fall out of love halfway either. They either love you with soul-deep devotion or not at all. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio woman in her early 30s who had been with her partner for 6 years. Everyone said they were soulmates, deeply spiritual, emotionally intimate, unshakable, but he cheated once. He said it meant nothing. He cried, begged, wrote letters, said it would never happen again. She listened, she nodded. She didn't scream, didn't destroy anything. She just said, if what we had was real, you would have protected it. And then she left. No second chances, no months of back and forth, no contact. People were stunned. How can someone love so deeply and then walk away so easily? They asked. But that's the thing. She didn't walk away easily. She died inside. She grieved for months, but she never looked back. Because Scorpio's love is a soul contract, and when that contract is broken, they don't just break up. They spiritually terminate the connection. No lingering, no drama, no let's just be friends. They loved you like you were there forever. But the moment you proved you weren't worthy of that kind of devotion, the forever expired. And it won't matter how many good memories you shared. It won't matter what you apologize for, because once Scorpio sees the shadow that cannot be unseen, they love you from a distance, silently, like a closed chapter in a sacred book. And that is what haunts people, because deep down, they know they'll never be loved that way again. Life lesson. When Scorpio loves you, you hold something sacred, their trust, their loyalty, their soul. But if you betray that love, don't expect a clean wound. Expect a cosmic shift, the kind that leaves you wondering why no one else ever feels as deep, as intense, as eternal. Because Scorpio didn't just love you, they became one with you. And now that they're gone, a piece of your spirit will always know what it means to lose something irreplaceable. Reason 10. They don't destroy you. They let you destroy yourself. You challenged them. You lied. You manipulated. You thought you were in control. You thought the Scorpio would explode, retaliate, maybe even fall apart. But they didn't. Instead, they stepped back. They observed. They said less. They did less. And then the strangest thing happened. Your life began to unravel. Not because they cast a curse, not because they wished you harm, but because you were left alone with the truth of who you are. You see, Scorpio doesn't need to destroy you. They simply withdraw their energy and let the weight of your own deception collapse in on itself. They are masters of karmic timing. They know that lies rot from the inside out, that betrayal festers, that what you thought you got away with always circles back, and they won't interfere. Because while you're busy maintaining the illusion, they've already handed the situation over to the universe. They don't seek revenge, they trust cosmic law. Let me tell you a story. A Scorpio man, early 40s, was in business with a longtime associate. That associate slowly began siphoning money behind his back. Not enough to notice immediately, but enough to matter. When the Scorpio discovered it, he didn't confront him right away. He didn't file a lawsuit. He simply shifted. He moved accounts. He cut off access. He began building a new company, one the partner knew nothing about. And when the betrayal fully surfaced, the Scorpio didn't even show up to the confrontation. He sent a brief message. I won't fight for what you chose to forfeit. I trust that what you stole will become the weight that sinks you. Months later, the associate's finances collapsed. He was sued by others. His reputation was gone. Scorpio never lifted a finger, never raised their voice. They just allowed the law of cause and effect to do what it always does. Because Scorpio knows, people who hurt others are already living in destruction. All they need is time and silence for that truth to emerge. And Scorpio has both. That's why challenging a Scorpio is never about the blow-up. It's about the slow decay you never expected, the unraveling of your mask, your motives, your own inner lies. Scorpios don't curse you. They let you listen to the silence long enough until it starts echoing back everything you were running from. And by the time you try to fix it, they're already gone, healed, thriving. While you're left inside the fire you built for someone else. Life lesson. Scorpios don't fight battles. They let energy reveal the truth. They don't have to destroy you. Because if your heart was dishonest, you'll eventually destroy yourself. And by the time that happens, they won't be watching. They'll be rising, again, on a path that no longer includes your name. Reason 11. They can see the end before you see the beginning. You just met them. You're excited, curious, attracted. You're imagining all the possibilities. But the Scorpio? They've already read the ending. They looked into your eyes, felt your energy, watched your subtle body language, and within minutes, they knew if this would be a divine union or a slow collapse you weren't prepared for. Because Scorpio is not just intuitive, they are prophetic. They don't just sense red flags, they sense futures, potential timelines, unspoken truths trying to become real. This is why you should never challenge them, because while you're still performing the beginning, they're already watching the exit. Scorpio energy is ruled by Pluto, the gatekeeper of birth and death, beginning and end. And because of that, they were born with a gift and a burden to see what others can't, to feel what will come long before it arrives. Let me tell you a story. A Scorpio woman, mid-30s, started dating someone who, on paper, was perfect, smart, ambitious, spiritual, attentive. But after their third date, he made a small offhand joke about how he didn't believe in therapy and that people who dwell on their emotions were too sensitive for real life. She didn't say much. She smiled, finished dinner, thanked him for the evening, and then disappeared. Not because she was offended, but because she had seen the entire relationship play out in that moment. She had heard the dismissiveness behind the charm, felt the control behind the compliments, saw the conflict that would come years later, when her emotional depth would be mocked instead of honored. She saw the end and chose to avoid the damage. That's Scorpio. They don't need 10 reasons, they only need one truth. And that's why people often feel unnerved around them, because while you're just trying to vibe, they're reading your core, your attachment style, your relationship to power, your self-worth, your secret addictions, the way you flinch when asked about your past. They don't judge you for it, but they calculate if your shadow is compatible with theirs. Because if it's not, they'll step away. No drama, no closure, just distance. They're not being harsh, they're being wise. Because Scorpio knows the cost of ignoring early truths. They've done it before, and they paid for it with years they'll never get back. So now, when they feel something is off, they trust that feeling. And that trust in their own insight, it saves them from chaos others walk right into. Life lesson. Scorpio is not obsessed with control. They're devoted to clarity. So when they sense the ending, even if you're just starting, they will honor that knowing. Don't challenge it. Don't try to manipulate it, because while you're still clinging to what could be, they've already blessed the ending and let it go. That's not coldness, that's vision. And when you realize they were right all along, they'll be gone. Already writing a better story, one you were never meant to finish with them. Reason 12. They were reborn while you were still plotting. You thought you had time. Time to fix it. Time to manipulate. Time to circle back and pull the strings one more time. But what you didn't realize was this. While you were still plotting, Scorpio was already reborn. This is the part that breaks people. They're expecting the old version of Scorpio, the one who once loved them, tolerated them, forgave them. But when they return, that version no longer exists. Because Scorpio doesn't just move on, they metamorphosize. They die to who they were, and they don't come back. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, planet of death and rebirth, not metaphorically, but energetically. When they go through emotional trauma, they don't heal slowly like others. They go inward, deep. They tear themselves open. They face every shadow. They let their old identity burn. And then they rise. Different, sharper, colder, wiser, unreachable. You were still playing games in the dark. They became the light. You were still trying to manipulate their past self. But now, that version is gone. Let me tell you a true story. A Scorpio man in his early 30s had been in a situationship, years of emotional push-pull, hot and cold, never defined. The other person thought they had him wrapped around their finger, kept him on standby, disappeared, reappeared, always assuming he'd still be there, and for a while, he was. Until one day, he wasn't. No text, no goodbye, no drama. He just disappeared. 6 months later, he was in a healthy relationship. He had built a new business, started a fitness journey, was traveling the world, and when the past tried to reach out, there was no response. Not because he hated them, but because he had already buried that life. That's Scorpio. They don't warn you, they don't explain. They transform in silence, and that transformation, it's irreversible. You can't beg the phoenix to return to ashes. You can't drag the butterfly back into the cocoon. Because what Scorpio understands on a spiritual level is this: you don't win by getting even. You win by outgrowing the entire dynamic. So while you were still trying to get under their skin, they were building armor made of soul. While you were still talking about what was, they were living in what will be. And by the time you realize what you've lost, you're no longer qualified to approach who they've become. Life lesson. Scorpios don't come back as the same person. If you've challenged them, betrayed them, doubted them, by the time you reach for their hand again, they've outgrown the version of themselves that ever reached back. They don't close the door on you. They walk through another one. And once they're on the other side, you don't even exist in the same emotional universe anymore. Because Scorpio doesn't destroy people. They destroy their own illusions. And in that fire, they become something you can never control, never break, and never forget. Conclusion: the truth about challenging a Scorpio. So now you know. You've seen what happens when you challenge a Scorpio. It's not loud, it's not predictable, it's not something you'll walk away from unchanged. Because Scorpio is not just a zodiac sign, it's a soul archetype, one that carries the wisdom of death, the silence of truth, and the fire of rebirth. You thought it was just a personality trait, intense, mysterious, maybe a little controlling. But now you understand, Scorpio is initiation, a confrontation with your own shadow, a test of how deep you're willing to go into truth, loyalty, and transformation. They don't just react, they absorb, they measure, and when necessary, they disappear with purpose. They don't destroy people, they destroy illusions. And if you're brave enough to stay honest with them, they'll become your fiercest ally, your most profound mirror, your sacred guardian. But if you lie, if you manipulate, if you treat their love like a game, then you will learn the hard way. Scorpio doesn't punish, the truth does. And Scorpio is truth wrapped in fire. So what's the lesson? Maybe it's this. In a world full of surface-level connection, Scorpio is a reminder that depth matters, that you can't fake loyalty, that energy doesn't lie, that silence speaks, and that transformation isn't pretty, but it's necessary. Because every time you challenge a Scorpio, you're not just dealing with a person, you're facing a part of the cosmos that was designed to strip away what's false and reveal what's real. So don't be afraid of them. But don't underestimate them either, because the moment you do, they'll be gone, transformed, unreachable, and you'll be left standing in the ashes, wondering how you lost something that was never yours to control, only to respect. If this message struck something deep in you, if you've been that Scorpio, or if you've ever lost one, then let us know in the comments. Share your story, your silence, your transformation. And if you want more deep, soul-awakening truths about Scorpio energy, transformation, and spiritual wisdom, subscribe to the Path to Buddha Wisdom, where mystery meets meaning, where truth has no filter, where Scorpio energy is not just explained, it's honored.